Dad.
School's on fire.
You alright?
Yeah, what's going on?
I saw two guys come from the other side.
Holy God.
They had big black bags and camo gear on.
Oh my God.
Where'd you go?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Welcome back to the Harbor, everyone. And if you're new here, thanks for tuning in. I'm the Kino Cowboy. I'm with my co-host Scott Keith. Today we're talking about Elephant from 2003, directed by Gus Van Sant. This was a casher picture, not a casher picture, but he can't be with us today. He's got some stuff going on, but also he has a GoFundMe. We're going to put that in the thing below if you want to donate to his mom who's battling cancer. So check that out. But this was his pick, and he recommended this a long time ago. And the funny part about it is I just wrote it down because it was one that he wanted to do. And then I forgot what the whole movie was about. So I went in completely blind, which is a very interesting thing because
Me too. The same thing happened to me, not to interrupt you, but I had read about this and knew what it was about. And then there's a point in the movie I'd forgotten because it was however long ago. And then there's a point in the movie where I'm like, oh yeah, this is that movie. So it's very effective to go in that.
Effective. I'm glad I watched it the way I did.
Yes.
Because if you're watching this episode and you don't know what it is, it's pretty much a response to Columbine. It's a Columbine movie, basically, without calling it Columbine. And it's done in one of the most tasteful ways you could have possibly done it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't see making a movie about a school shooting, even just saying that to people. I think especially in this environment that we're in now politically, but just saying that to people, they would get messed up and offended and say it's exploitative. So the fact that he was able to make this movie and it not feel exploitative and feel, I mean, because he originally wanted to make a documentary, I read. But he went for a very, I don't know if cinema verite is the word, but naturalistic portrayal, fly on the wall almost way of doing it, which I think works with aplomb personally.
Yes.
Did Casher say why he wanted to pick this?
He found it such to be an interesting execution of wrong choice of words.
Oh,
sorry,
come
everybody.
on. I did bring this up. That's funny. That was unintentional. I wouldn't have said anything. Jesus. We were talking before the camera started rolling on this. Like, so how bit heavy is this podcast gonna be? Because I feel like we can't do as many bits as we do.
That's the thing though, is that we do live in an age of post irony, and kids these days are so jaded. This comes from a completely different time, 2003.
Right. Back when people could still be shocked.
Yes.
Now the government's saying, hey, there's UFOs and nobody gives a crap except Adrian.
Yeah. And like 2003, that was only 4 years after the shooting. And now we have a shooting once a week, very desensitized in a different way.
And we did have shootings before Columbine. I am not the most read up on Columbine. I did play Super Columbine Massacre RPG, which is as tasteful of a video game as you can make. I guess using RPG Maker, it's not terribly offensive. I don't know. I played it in high school, but I'm not super into the lore. I don't romanticize. Not that people who are into it romanticize it, but I'm not always super fascinated by like true crime or serial killers.
And that is a problem.
Shootings.
I've seen.
Not that I'm not interested in it, but I don't watch an entire 12 hours of a docuseries over like one criminal. I'm not that guy.
I've seen a couple of documentaries here and there about it on TV. I think just over the years, nothing like crazy. I think I've seen Bowling for Columbine, which is what's his name? I forgot.
Michael Moore.
Michael
I
Moore.
saw some of that.
Seen
I do
that.
not like Michael Moore. I didn't watch it.
Um, I kind of got a soft spot for that guy in a
Dude,
weird
I don't is I
liberal
think
way.
rhetorically he's bent out of shape and just he uses instead of finding evidence to see what the truth is, he just cobbles together whatever evidence he can to make a point. And he's very self-obsessed. So
Yeah,
I went off on a rant about Michael Moore. And by the way, I've never sat through an entire one of his documentaries. So I with a disclaimer there.
I
But
watched Fahrenheit 9/11 in high school and I enjoyed it because it did at the time I was still very like, you know, Christian politically, you know,
oh, so you were like, what you mean Bush isn't a good president?
no, just like I don't know, it was interesting to me at the time. I'm not saying Michael Moore's a saint. I'm just saying that's one of the things I've seen. I've seen other things, you know, Dylan Klebold, Eric Harris. I know Columbine, but I will say I'm not one of those. I can't stand this fascination, like obsession with true life or true crime. Sorry, true crime. Uh, Fantasizing over dating serial killers, stuff like that. It's insane. It's out of control.
yeah, the thirsty like thirst trap stuff with that Dahmer show that came out.
Yeah,
It's weird. I will say something about, and we are here to talk about the movie and not talk about Columbine, but it's impossible to not talk about Columbine and school
right.
shooting. This, like I do not have a solution for the gun problem in our country. I will say if there was a solution, it probably should have been 20 years ago. But I think a lot of people who romanticize these shooters, and I think the media has, at least at the time, has tried to portray the shooters as more complicated than they actually are, and kind of deeper and having deeper motivations, than actually have, because it's grasping for a reason. That's all it is. It's like, well, there has to be some reason these people did, and that's what's so terrifying, is that there was no reason and it's just chaos. They're just two nihilistic, effed up kids who happen to find each other. And I've even read theories like one kind of manipulated or goaded the other into doing it. Dylan and Eric, I always get them. I don't really know. I can't tell them apart. You could put them in a photo and I wouldn't be able to pick out which is which. But I think this movie kind of does a good job. It shows that yes, they have trouble, but at no point do you see them go through anything that like they had one at an this is maybe the most cinematic thing that happens, or the most untrue to life thing that happens, is the excessive throwing of spit wads at one of them while they're in the middle of class. Like kids will get stuff thrown at them or stuff, and it's like all over them, and the teacher's not noticing because the audience has to be able to visually see it. I get it. But even, I mean, that is something that no sane person would shoot up a school for.
Right.
And I guess my point is, like, this movie does show, I think it doesn't point the finger toward anything. I have a problem with its depiction of video games, but that's just because I was sick this weekend and played Call of Duty all weekend and feel attacked. But that's just me being a capital G gamer, incel, neckbeard nerd.
But that's why I think it works so well, is it doesn't make you go into this deep psychology exploration of what made these characters go so bad.
No, it's the banality of evil. It reminded me of Zone of Interest a little.
Yeah.
And even in its use of sound, how sparse and echoing everything is.
There's just all this nuance on the surface. It's enough to me to get who these kids were at the time and place that they were living. We don't need any clunky exposition or anything like that. The film,
we don't need like a drunk dad beating them or something.
No.
It is funny. We do see a drunk dad at the very first scene of this movie, in the very first shot of this movie.
Yeah.
But it's for, one of the cool kids, one of the well-adjusted kids, and the one that and I think this is based on Columbine explicitly. They're like, hey, don't go to school today, sort of thing. Didn't they say that to somebody, to at least one person?
Yeah, they told a couple. Themselves told a couple of people like beforehand. Yeah,
yeah.
It wasn't like I don't know if it was on the way walking in, but It was definitely a couple of people that they were cool with. They're like, hey,
Yeah.
just don't go. But yeah, just the film just lets you it
It
lets you
doesn't
in on
moralize.
everything. Yeah, it's through visuals, of course, because film is a visual medium, and the way it's
No, it's
executed,
not.
it works for me. Like we see the one of the shooters just playing the piano, in his house, and we get this like 360 shot of his room, and it's not some fucked up like weirdo room. It's purposely showing, hey, this is a regular teenage boy's room. That's all it is. It's nothing like crazy. And that's the point. These were pretty much, before it happened, normal guys. We don't need a true crime examination. And we really we get a little bit of the edginess when we see the other guy playing that computer game where he's just shooting people. But you have to remember 2003 was a little bit different. And I don't even think that Gus Van Sant is saying video games are bad. I just think he just put it in there because I don't know.
Yeah, he does. He does have that sort of that visual parallel where it goes into the first person shot of him shooting students for a bit, like it's a video game. Uh,
Briefly, yeah.
briefly, so you could say he's making that parallel. Even that though, it's so sparse and empty, and it looks like a student project of like somebody tinkering around an Unreal Engine or whatever. Than it is an
Yeah,
actual. It's something they
fascinating.
made for the movie, clearly.
But it's like, yeah, it's like I respect Van Sant from like re keeping his like indie roots with this film. He made Good Will Hunting and then that Psycho remake. We're not gonna talk about that, but he could have gone bigger and crazier with his movies, but he chose this smaller project, $3 million. Pretty indie for a movie
I
like
would I
this.
would say quite indie. I mean,
Yeah,
there's not even any quote unquote real actors in this
and
movie.
that's what I was fascinated by. Before I remembered what this movie was, I was like, okay, this really just feels like the way he was shooting it, these long takes, long following, tracking shots. It felt like moving photographs capturing just that day and that time and that kind of imagery of like high school life. And I don't know. So for that, I was like, wow, this is such a cool take on that because we have 1,000 high school movies. Not all of them have to
Yeah, and
be,
you've seen about 900 of them. For
yeah, not all of them have to be done the same way. So before I realized what this movie was, I was just kind of just basking in it. Sometimes you kind of forget about certain things the farther away you get from high school. And I like that
how
cool autumn
boring it
weather.
is.
You see like the breath of the guys throwing the football around, and
All how clinical the interiors are.
yeah.
Yeah,
And it's like it should be this pretty laid back kind of low stress time because you're a teenager and you got your whole life ahead of you, but unfortunately that's not the case. I'm not just saying because they got shot up, but because things are
yeah. Although
complicated.
that doesn't help,
Yeah.
but it's
But it's just,
no, because everything, it's like your first time you're in love and you're like, oh, what are these feelings? I don't know how to deal with them. And now I'm dating in my 30s. I'm just like, first day, I'm like, so you want kids or are we wasting our time? Like it's sort of a thing.
yeah, these like long tracking shots are
This
such a
this
natural way.
movie,
Huh?
this movie I read has 88 shots.
Wow.
That's it.
That's
And
incredible.
half of those are in the shooting in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah. That's when it starts to
So
break up a bit.
it's yeah, also that what on average, I mean, for that first hour, it's over a minute per shot, if that's like, easily. So, and the average movie has over 1,000 shots or whatever.
Yeah.
Which
It's
is it is interesting. I didn't even because I was watching this, I was like, oh, this was like back when he was indie darling, was pre Goodwill Hunting, and then I was like, oh no, wait, no, this happened. This was made in the 2000s because
yeah.
Columbine was in '99. It clicked with me, which is interesting because it's. I guess the argument could be made, and I'm talking as somebody who's never been on a like professional film set.
I have.
The but like setting up the idea that like setting up all these different shots might actually be more labor intensive or more difficult. But I could easily see the argument of like getting the blocking right and timing right and composition right on all these moving parts, Rube Goldberg machine, without being ostentatious about it. This isn't Children of Men where they're like, look at this tracking shot. But it still, it almost feels like one of the students could be filming all this.
Yeah,
like totally. I want to say amateur. It feels amateur, but not. I guess indie. Just I'm really harping on how indie it feels.
Totally,
which to me seems like that. I don't know. Seems like to me, if I were a filmmaker, I would love to have my big Oscar-winning film, and then instead of you have people like I'm forgetting his name, made La La Land and Babylon, and Whiplash. That director, who's kind of in director's jail or was for a bit after Babylon, because he went big with his like dream project picture. This is like, oh, now I can get funding to do what I want, but then if it doesn't make its money back, I won't be in director's jail. Do you see what I'm saying?
Of course,
like I can just make all these sort of experimental like little films. This probably didn't take too long to shoot. I'm sure
20 days. 20 days shoot.
20 days shoot.
Yeah, and then also there's the other side of it. Really started happening in the 2010s where you make a successful indie film and then Disney and Fox start snatching up these directors and throw them into the biggest tentpoles possible for some reason.
Yeah, like, Eternals.
Whoa. Yeah.
Chloe Zhao, Nomadland. I like Nomadland quite a bit. Didn't see Eternals. But
it's no,
yeah. Well, it's from what I've heard, it doesn't play to her strengths, and because her strengths are Nomadland and not superhero movies.
Yeah, hot take apparently.
Hot take.
Some people. No, but it really does feel like you're following around these kids, like maybe you're one of the students with them, and the tracking shots have everything casually in the background in a way that lets you soak up the environment of just being back in school
and soaking up the environment. It's like the first hour of this is a giant establishing shot to establish the architecture of where the shooting is going to take place, so that it is uncanny and disturbing when we see that location again.
Totally.
And we can get a sense of how they move through school. I mean, just for that logically alone, we can get a sense of how it's laid out and how they're moving throughout the school. Which is just good for clarity of storytelling. But also, that uncanniness of when you see the environment again in chaos. And it establishes the school as a character. I just kept thinking of back to school, and I've worked at schools, by the way, just dropping that. And the idea of anything happening is sickening. And cops standing outside not doing anything is also sickening. Texas. But I don't know. I always appreciate it when a movie can make a location, even a banal one, its own character.
And it throws back to, I mean, we were younger, but we were in school in 2003 when this movie was made. So there is a kind of nostalgia to that in a way, even if I wouldn't be in high school for another 5 years, it's just, I don't know. It also, the naturalistic nature of it obviously makes it more shocking and raw at the end, but also it just replicates that feeling when you're walking to class and you're like wondering what other people have going on, and maybe you have a chance with that one girl that you made half of way eye contact with, and just like different. It's a whole different world that you kind of forget about because you've been out of for so long, at least for me, and it was just very realistic in that way. And I love the choice of, first of all, he didn't have a script. That's awesome. He had it all of this dialogue between the teenagers was all just improvised dialogue, which is crazy. And
right, he Larry David it.
Yeah, he pulled it off. It's like you can't get more realistic teenage dialogue than teenagers coming up with, what would they say?
Yeah. I mean, so he was just like, okay, in this scene, girls talk about how she's not hanging out with you guys enough. I'm assuming he had that sort of a script in that sense, but the script was bullet points.
Yeah, it's really cool. And like we get that roundtable conversation of like the teenagers talking with the teacher about what they think is like gay or not. Because in the like, oh, he's wearing that, he's probably gay. And it's just so reminiscent or just such a throwback because early 2000s was like a hard time for homosexuality, in my opinion.
It was like the, not that homophobia is not still around. If you're a Gen Z listener and you were like a kid in 2015 when gay marriage was legal,
Yeah.
legalized federally, 2015, I think.
Yes,
14?
it was.
15. It it was sort of the death throes of like mainstream homophobia. I mean, not that, again, not that still around, because it was, and we're from Arkansas, and this is set in Oregon, as different of the political climate as you can have in the United States, which is another thing. There was no gay straight alliance at our school that I remember, but also I was so socially isolated in high school that is
No, we didn't have anything like that really.
But no, in it, there are some LGBT themes broached in this, but they're pretty open to interpretation. I think thematically, the more I think about it, what's important about that, first of all, it's so naturalistic, like you said, and nuanced and kind of funny and simplistic, but that's because we're 20 years backwards in sexuality discourse. Like the LGBT didn't even have a Q on it. I think
Yeah.
it was still 4 letters. But they're talking about like, how can you tell somebody's interior by looking at their exterior? And that's what applies to the shooters. Because that's what we said is like, there's all this rationalizing of like, how to identify a school shooter and how to do this and how to do that. And that's the terrifying part, is that you don't know. You have some guesses. It's probably not the captain of the football team banging all the cheerleaders, getting them pregnant. But there is that level to it.
Totally. And it's like, I remember these old, outdated kind of discussions about sexuality back then. Not in 2003. I wasn't thinking about that stuff because I was too young. But just like in the 2000s, how mid 2000s when I was in middle school, everyone was calling you gay and slurs and shit like that. It was just
yet Queer Eye for the Straight Guy was on TV.
every movie, it was normal to call someone gay. It was just how it was.
And now we never do that.
But I'll just say it, like Bush era peak patriotism. It was a different time.
Well, that's because gays were out of the closet, but not everybody was on board yet, at least. So it was like, oh, now we can openly gay bash people instead of just ignoring that they're gay.
Okay. But yeah, some of those conversations like that, it does remind me of the conversations I had later on when I was like 14, 15, when I'm starting to really understand more complex sexuality. No, not exactly.
I had to break something in there.
It took a while for me to understand these kinds of things. But I don't know. It's still the 2000s. We were in high school in the late 2000s.
Yeah, I remember the 2000s.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just and also it's just interesting because Gus Van Sant, he's a queer filmmaker. So
he is?
Yeah.
That is interesting. Okay. That layers another part on it.
Yeah.
Because part of my so there's a scene toward the end, right before when stuff goes down, when one of them's taking a shower and the other steps in and kisses them. And I think you can overhear the dialogue like, I've never kissed anyone before. Have you? They say that. Which in my notebook I wrote, they're gay? Question mark, exclamation mark, question mark, exclamation mark. Because that was just out of left field. And then I thought, because I didn't know until just now that Gus Van Sant was gay. But that there's probably 2 readings that you could do of that. The first, what my mind immediately jumped to was like, this is homophobic. It's saying that their homophobia was a mental illness. It wants to connect those. And then I went, no, Scott, that's stupid. Because this movie's too nuanced for that. It's just, second one is like, it could just be a symptom of their suppression of their true selves and just that pressure from society causing it to boil over in the shooting. along with everything else. There's also the third option, which I think is equally, I mean, probably even more likely. This is probably how I read it, is that they just want one last moment of human connection before they shed all their humanity. And they've both just never kissed anyone. They're like, well, if we're going to do it, I mean, now,
yeah, because he gets in there and he says, I guess this is it. We're going to die today.
Yeah.
And it's just like, whoa. And there's also like the thought of, okay, maybe they have gay feelings and they feel like they can't truly come to terms with that because they know they'll get shit on and bullied more than they already do being straight presenting at school, so
right. And knowing that Van Sant is gay, and I don't know if he was out in 2003, but
I believe so. He's been openly gay for a long time.
Yeah, good for him.
Which is crazy for a queer director to take a narrative where two possibly gay guys shoot up a school. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Who knows if they're gay? I think he's probably leaning toward also, it could be what I said of like they're just wanting a moment of connection.
Yeah.
But also him leaning toward like this is another societal pressure of like people who aren't able to fully express themselves. And probably in that sense, even though it's ambiguous, the closest thing this movie gets to making a statement.
Totally. And I think he plays it so casually. Like I said, they don't get into this deep psychology with these guys. They lay it out all for you on the surface. And it doesn't try to get crazy with it. Like, even like when they're waiting, which is crazy, first of all, that they order guns off of the internet. And then
I actually have a problem with that because you can't get a gun. Maybe the laws were different back then, and I'm sure in Oregon they have stricter gun laws than here. That you can't just order a gun off the internet and have it delivered to your house. Like you just can't do that. If you order a gun off the internet, it goes to a licensed arms dealer and then you pick it up from the gun store. Like that's just not how it works. And if it is, it's not like an AR-15 or whatever that is. If something's coming to your house.
Yeah, I Googled it real quick and the Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris got theirs at a gun show from unlicensed sellers.
Right, which is a loophole. And so yeah, they didn't get on the internet. And another one I think they just got off the street. The Tech 9 they just got off a guy for like $500.
That might be just some of the more
it bugs me when liberal filmmakers portray like gun laws incorrectly, because then it gives conservatives ammo to be like, oh well, these like Hollywood liberals just don't know what they're talking about with guns, which may be true. I know there's an episode of Ozark that a clip went viral from there of some kid walking up to a store and like without doing a background check or anything, getting like an AR-15, and the way the gun store seller, I don't even own a gun by the way, but was talking to him. I know people who owns guns. My brother's a hunter and family and stuff, but I think it's like negative to the discourse to be misrepresent the facts like that in media if we're going to have an honest conversation about it. And this is not me coming across as pro-gun, I hope, but I don't know. It's a complicated issue. We're not going to solve it here on the harbor. That's what you should title this episode. Scott solves school shootings.
You can purchase a gun online, but it can't be shipped directly to you. Okay.
I don't
know if that's ever changed or not. Also, now I'm worried about my internet history.
What do you have on your internet history? Oh, because you've been doing that?
How did Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris get their guns? And then I just searched, can you order?
Oh, I did that too. Well, I don't know.
No, but other than that, though, what I was saying, though, is like they have the History Channel on TV, and it's a thing about Nazi regime and stuff, and it's not trying to point like on the surface it might be like, oh, are these guys Nazis? No, not. They just have the History Channel on. That's another detail I like, because even one of them was like, is that Hitler? And the other guy's like, oh yeah, that's Hitler.
Yeah, which is establishing them as yeah, they know who Hitler is, but not really.
Yeah,
they have a very superficial understanding, because again, these guys aren't that complex.
Yes.
And also the History Channel for years before they got into Ancient Aliens and crap was called the Hitler Channel. They would make fun of it because everything was just about World War II and Hitler.
Yeah.
To be fair, there's a lot to be said. A lot went on.
Yeah, that's true. And
Yeah, that's true. World War II was a big deal, Scott.
I will say that here right now, World War II, kind of a big deal.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm gonna say on the harbor, the Holocaust happened.
Yeah, we're almost said. Never mind. Um, I want to shout out the
Hitler,
no no Gus Van
Ron
Sant.
DeSantis.
No, I'm just saying like as a guy who watched Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back 150 times growing up, it's like the idea of him making this like after his cameo in that movie where he's just counting Hollywood money is pretty baller to me.
Oh yeah,
It's
no,
like,
Gus Van Sant gets it.
because Ben Affleck's like, can we get a cue? And he's like, Jesus, Ben, I said I'm busy.
He's just peeling off hundreds, counting.
Yeah, it's like a bag with an actual like dollar sign on it, like a cartoon. But yeah, I don't know. So, because like I know Good Will Hunting's not actually like this big movie. Like it really was when they were shooting that thing, they had to like be very small with the amount of locations they shot at and just work with what they had. And they really just got lucky with the casting pools that they got with some of the stars that were just willing to come on with like weird connections. They really just got lucky because
Yeah, mainly Robin Williams. I don't
because
even
really
know.
that's a smaller film. People
No,
don't
it is.
realize.
It's character driven, but it's got to be one of the more profitable films of all time.
Yeah, it's just
It
crazy.
certainly, if in terms of relation to its budget, if you like how many times its budget it made, it has to be up there.
And it's just it really was this turn of the century thing. Like this came like Columbine happened in 1999 and then 2001 9/11, it's
No, well, that's what they were talking about, and he brings it up. He doesn't really comment on it. It's the voiceover in the History Channel is talking about the Nazi propaganda machine. So without addressing it, that's him addressing the media furor around Columbine, because that's what made Columbine different. There were other school shooters. In my research before this, just read like an essay that one of them had written about school shootings and how to stop them. He said more police and more metal detectors. He did not say armed teachers because stupid. But so I mean, there were this wasn't the first school shooting. I've even read the argument that there aren't significantly more school shootings, that they're just covered more. I have no idea about that. But
I don't think that's true.
But anyway, what I'm saying, it doesn't feel true. I don't have data, but like it certainly doesn't feel true. It's like I can't imagine the 80s had fewer shootings than the 2010s. But him talking about the media furor, because there was a lot of disinformation and sort of propaganda going around about like, were they in the trench coat mafia, and that got spread around, and that was nothing. That was like an entirely different group of friends. Or there's another one of them. I saw a documentary. I was during my research of them talking about like, okay, well, were they loners? Like, not as much as you think. It's not like they didn't talk to anybody. But the thing is, if one person on TV on the news said, yeah, they were loners, and then another student who maybe or may have not known them that well saw that on the news or heard it from somebody else, it mimetically just like virally moved around. And so that the media, and that's their job to report on the news, but it taints the investigation immediately.
It really did rock the world though. And it was kind of like
not enough.
Well, obviously not, but it just wasn't reported on as much. Whether it happened as much, that's debatable, but like it really was this big thing. And it kind of like there was the Virginia Tech shooting, that was a big one. But those were like the two big ones of like the 2000s. And then it wasn't until Sandy Hook that it became this big frenzy again. And that is what younger folks maybe watching this movie may not understand, is like there was the kind of like a lull for a while and not like one shooting per month, being reported.
No, and we alluded to this earlier, but about the post irony and being at that age, it's because even if we were young at the time, like I remember a pre 9/11 America, and just the vibes were different. And that's not just me growing into an adult and like seeing the evils of the world. Like the vibes were different. And there's nothing to contrast our current crazy ass political environment to, if you're Gen Zer.
And that's what I really got a sense of this when one of the shooters is at his house. I don't know if he like left school or if he's just, I know it's a non-linear kind of way of storytelling, which I think is great. But he's at his house and like you see his living room and his kitchen, and it's just this very quaint, quintessential late 20th century house. And the kitchen and the rooms that he's walking in just feels like these leftover remnants of the 20th century. And it's only been 2 years since 9/11 in this movie when they filmed it, but it really just feels like the end of that version of America. Like you were saying, I consider like that, like old America, pre 9/11's old America. And it's just an interesting depiction because what they really captured that like transitionary area from that old America to post 9/11 Iraq war, insane, everything gets crazier, and they capture that really well whether they realized it or not with just some of the simple and real sets, not even sets, like real houses and stuff, and just some of these conversations like what we were talking about homosexuality, how simple it was 20 years ago. Just I don't know, and I do remember this kind of era very well even though I was a kid.
No, I do. The opening shot reminded me of American Beauty, and I've been thinking of that movie a lot recently because because I watched that in high school in 2010 or something.
Yeah.
And one of the things that makes that movie so quaint, and a lot of 90s movies that quaint, that are kind of about this Gen X attitude of like, corporate life sucks, the man, I'm trapped in my job and my
Yeah.
marriage, is like in the current economic and environment, and just with the prognosis of the climate and political climate and everything, those seem like quaint concerns, and that a lot of people would love to be bored in their corporate job where they get a super nice house and things like
Yes.
that.
Totally.
This is a different time. Also Kevin Spacey's in it, which is also very different watching it now. But I do want to say before I forget, going back a bit, as objectively as this movie is presented, it's still like sorry, I'm cutting out. There's a lot of scenes that show a subjective POV, mainly through using depth of field. And you see it most notably with Michelle.
Yes.
Who is, everything seems to be constantly out of focus around her. Other students, she's in the locker room listening to other girls talk about her, whisper about how she smells, I think. And it was hard for me to hear because I think she doesn't, purposely, because she doesn't shower after gym because she's ashamed of her body because she's a teenage girl. And who wants to shower after gym or at all? But and you have her kind of running to the library right before the shooting happens. In this, we see it repeated, I think, 3 times of Elias shooting with a camera, haha, pun, one of the other characters. And you could ask, like, what's the purpose of her in the narrative? And I think it's just to show that archetype. There's a lot of archetypes ticked off here that are all somewhat true to life.
Yes.
And just to explore, like, what was that day like? And
yeah, exactly. It's really
different
just letting you be in the
yeah.
moment with her and other characters. And also, I want to say we have the naturalistic way of them just improvising teenage dialogue, which adds to it, which adds to the school as a character itself, as well as just the environment of you kind of just soaking that in. But also, the casting of the kids itself does a lot of the storytelling. These unique looking kids, especially Michelle, she's kind of this softer, kind of nerdier girl, doesn't want to show her legs or wear shorts, because she's ashamed of her body. And you don't need a bunch of info to understand this. Just from the casting and her cadence alone is enough to tell you everything you need to know. And I think it's brilliant casting because it does a lot of the heavy lifting for simple storytelling like that. It's
Quick anecdote relating to what we're saying.
yeah.
Gym in ninth grade, I would change in the bathroom stalls in the locker room just because I was chubby.
Yeah, I get that.
Because I've always had body image issues. I was complaining to you about feeling fat before we actually started rolling here. And you were like, "You look good." I'm like, shut up.
Yeah, well, I've had body issues my whole life too.
Yeah, well, you should. That was mean. That was mean. I'm sorry. It was right.
I know.
But relative to us, I would like change out of sight of people, and the reaction of the other students were like, "What, are you gay? Are you gay or something? Is that why you don't want to change in front of us?" I'm like, wouldn't that make me less gay? I don't understand. Just to let you know, in the 2000s, where everything was with sexual politics.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like, oh, you don't want to show your bulge to us? Does that make you gay?
Gay.
You don't want to see us in our tidy whities? You must be home. Like, what?
Yeah, dude.
That was a surface memory.
That's insane.
It's so funny now. Looking back, even at the time, no, that's so funny.
Yeah. And it's just like her just facing away, and it's out of focus, and you can kind of see they don't really show you those girls in the back, just partially. And like you have to kind of really listen or even turn up the TV to hear fully what they're saying. It's such a realistic depiction of what it's like to feel anxious at school and be bullied and like overhear people talking about you and feeling insecure. And so much so that sometimes you're walking around and you'll see a group of girls laugh and you'll think automatically that they're talking about you when they're probably not, just because you have so much problems and being bullied and insecure. I talk from experience. Middle school was tough.
Dude, eighth grade was legitimately one of the worst years of my life.
Seventh grade for me.
I was literally institutionalized for a bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to one up you there.
No, I got you. In seventh grade, I broke my foot, and when I was walking into my locker in between classes, a guy walked up, called me some names, and then stomped on my broken foot just because he didn't like me. Yeah, that's real bullying right there. To be fair, though, he almost got fucking kicked out of the school once they figured it out. So I, being a nice Christian boy, spared him.
Yeah. And how's your Christianity doing now? Anyway. God, do you remember that Columbine book, She Said Yes? You ever heard of that? There was a myth going around that this one girl in the library.
Yeah, I wanted to get to this.
Was like, he asked, like, "Are you a Christian?" She was like, "Yes." And he was like, "Why?" And then shot her. And there's a book written about it, and it was sold at churches and talked about in churches. Not true. None of it.
It got worse than that. It got worse, and I experienced it firsthand at my church.
Yeah. It got worse than that. I remember reading it. How'd it go at your church?
It wasn't just one girl. It was, to us, when I was in youth group, they were telling us basically that the whole reason they were shooting up the school was to kill Christians, and that they were going around asking people in the library, "Are you a believer of Christ? Denounce Jesus, denounce God. If you don't, we'll shoot you." And then they were telling us how heroic it was that people died saying, "I'll never denounce Jesus," and like that this was a thing. And I believed this for years growing up. And then I was like, one time I was just like, wait a minute, none of this is true whatsoever. How did this happen? How did this escalate? And it's so gross to me that they appropriated a school shooting to fit like
it's great. I don't want to turn this into religion bashing.
But it's such a major part of it.
And it is. And the idea that like, if there's a benevolent God, I mean, A, that he would let this happen. That's a whole argument of evil, 1,000-year-old argument. But B, that he wouldn't be like, you can just lie to this guy. I don't care if this guy, you can just later be like, yeah, I was saying it to save my life. I really don't think Jesus Christ would have a problem with that.
I don't think he'd have a problem with it
An
at all.
all-powerful being being like, no, I want you to lie, and then no, I want you to tell the truth and then get shot just so my name doesn't have blood on it. I don't.
That's literally how I rationalized it in my head though as a kid, because I was like, I'm not gonna die because of this. And like you had like kids emotional, like saying, yes, I would never deny the name of God, even if there was a gun at my head. Dude, that's fucked up, dude. And that really
But
brought back a lot of those memories watching this movie.
George Bush,
It's fucking crazy shit.
evangelicals. Yeah, we'll
No.
see. We'll see if this next election, if Gingrich and others will resent courting the evangelical vote.
I don't want to say it's funny, but it was kind of funny for me watching this at first, because like 40 minutes in, I'm like, wow, this is such a interesting, like indie naturalistic take on like just observing high school life. And then you see them with the duffel bags walking in, and then it hits like a brick, and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot what this movie was.
Yeah, me too. Immediately. There's so many, even the bulimia is so nonchalant with it. There's a scene of bulimics because I feel like eating disorders were like becoming more mainstream around this time too, or at least
yeah, totally. It was totally a thing. It was a major problem actually. My older cousin, she had friends that were dealing with it. She was a bit older than me. And
Oh
I
yeah,
remember hearing about it, not really understanding what it was, and being younger, being like, well, why would you want to get rid of the delicious food you just ate? Because I'm a fat
and
fuck.
now Americans are just fat. And I will say this on the podcast too. Adrian and I are no danger of anorexia or bulimia. We're eating fine.
Yeah, we're eating good, boy. But that is like because it wasn't this well-known phenomenon, school shootings, and it still felt like this, like I said, old America safe, old wholesome kind of feel to it that adds to the surrealism of what's happening and why you can understand people reacting the way they do. And I find it a very realistic way of these people.
What's interesting to
reacting.
me watching this in 2024 is the way people react. Nowadays, we're so, I guess, educated about it. If you heard gunshots, you would know what's going on.
Yeah, immediately.
Because they didn't call them active shooter drills, but we had active shooter drills when I was in elementary school. And I remember not even realizing until years later when I thought back on it, I was like, oh, that was an active shooter. That wasn't just like an intruder, a kidnapper or something. That's what that was.
What's the kid with the yellow shirt, like the first kid with the drunk dad? I don't remember his name.
John?
Yeah, I guess so, John. But he immediately sees them walk in with these duffel bags and knows like something's up. And I feel like back then, like even in like middle school or something, just like I was such a stupid, dumb, sheltered kid. Like, especially back then before it was shootings all the time. I don't know. I would have been like, not, I would have not seen it coming. I would have walked up probably with them, been like, what do you got in the bag or something like that. And it's such a surreal thing that they can just walk around for a couple minutes in the hallways. Like, well, where's everybody? I thought the bell was supposed to go off or something. They're kind of like checking their watches and shit. And you can see a couple people walking by, because why would they think people are walking around with guns back then?
I went to I think it's a private school, it's a Baptist school. I delivered food to a school the other day, and there was a security guard with a flat jacket, not a flat jacket, but a bulletproof vest just at the front desk. That's how much things have changed.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. I was thinking of like, dude, imagine being in England and then visiting here and seeing that, how weird it would be. Like if you're an English fan.
Like, there's no intense music, there's no eerie music. It almost is completely quiet, and it just lays it all bare. And it's so effective because we've got a sense of this school as a community, the layout, the people, and now it's just complete chaos, but it's not, because there's a delayed reaction. They're not even sure what's going on. There's the guy who looks out in the hallway and they're like, no, come back, dude. Let's finish this conversation. He's just shot. And even while the teacher's like pulling him back into the hall, into the class covered in blood, the teacher's still like halfway like, what the hell is going on? Because it's such a like a shock. To me, that's like really realistic. And I want to say, because I had this experience in sixth grade where I went to go to the bathroom during band, and I went into the bathroom. I don't know if it was during band, but it was near the band room. And I walked into the bathroom, and the paper towel dispenser was on fire, and this
I
guy
remember that.
ran out. He ran out past me, and my brain just, it was such a shocking and weird, surreal image that it couldn't even process it. And instead of me pulling the fire alarm or getting a teacher or something, I just went back to class. I didn't even pee. My brain like went onto autopilot, and I went and sat down. I was like 11 or 12, and it was like 5 minutes I was sitting there, and then the fire alarm went off, and then my brain registered what happened, and then I went and described the kid, what he looked like and stuff, to the teachers. And it was, to this day, I've always thought about that event. Like, why didn't my brain let me react in a certain way that I should have? And I don't know why, but it reminds me of all these kids, how they react in this movie. To me, it is scarily on point with that kind of thing on just a completely different level. So, yeah.
Oh, I want to talk about Benny.
Okay.
Benny, the guy at the end, athlete, only black guy in the movie. I was trying to describe him without saying that. The only black guy in Oregon. Is, what do you think the point of his storyline being introduced at the end there was?
I don't know, man. Just, I couldn't tell you.
I was just thinking about it. I think it's to comment on or observe how there's this, I think a lot of people, not you and me, but a lot of people have this fantasy of like, oh man, I would stop that. You hear this from the NRA types all the time. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't let that happen. Mark Wahlberg saying he'd stop 9/11, that sort of shit.
Yeah.
But, sorry, Mark Wahlberg. But he has a section on his Wikipedia called hate crimes.
Yeah.
Sorry. But you know, people have this like, I'm gonna be like John Wick sort of thing. Like, they think the animal instinct will come out and they'll just be this badass. And I think that was really shutting that down. Of like, this guy, you know, almost like cautiously or casually walking around. We haven't seen him before this scene. He has no lines. And for a split second, you think, okay, is he going to take this guy out? Is he going to be able to right hook him or get the gun from him? And no, he's shot down just as easily as anyone else. Which I think is, Roger Ebert said about this film, not to just quote other critics, because I'm the same as Roger Ebert as my echelon of criticism. There's a lot of commentary on what Truffaut said about it's impossible to make an anti-war film because films inherently glorify whatever they're showing. But this is as good of an anti-violence film as anything. And Alex Frost, who plays his character's name is Alex, one of the shooters. He has said, like, as time goes on, like, he's less and less worried that anybody will emulate a shooting because of this. A, because of the way this is, it doesn't make it look cool. And just B, like, I don't think that's why people, you know, do shootings, you know. If anything, they want notoriety from the news, not just because
school shooters aren't watching cool movies like this. They're watching, you know, not to say The Matrix
straight to DVD bullcrap. Yeah,
no, I'm just saying, like, they're watching The Matrix and cooler shoot 'em up shit. Like, there's no dramatized, there's no like dramatic music,
slow motion, Zack Snyder.
There's no kids like begging for their lives, intense music on them blaring. You know, it's very quiet, and there's no like thinking, oh, there's going to be a hero here or anything. And it's just like the only part where we get someone even mildly trying to like beg for their life is the teacher when he's like in the hallway, and it's kind of for like from this far away kind of thing.
And then when
Yeah, at the very
guy
final
says,
scene.
you know, there's more students out there just like me, so be careful how you treat them. And then Fake lets them go and then shoots them in the back, which is just
Yeah,
so sinister and also true.
yeah, and it's such like a unheard of thing for them in this movie that like the guy with his dad are able to just talk outside of the school while this is going on because it's not even fully clear what's going on and like you can't even register it.
Yeah, they think it's a fire. It's just a fire. They don't know what's going on. Because
Yeah,
the whole time I'm thinking like, get the f out of there. Go
yeah,
across town.
but what very harrowing depiction to me, very hyper realistic in a great way.
Addresses the elephant in the room.
Yeah. Which the only semblance of an elephant is that drawing one of the shooters has in his bedroom. And I know,
I didn't even see that.
yeah, it was just one of like a drawing on the wall. And I don't even think that's why it's called elephant. He was wanting to call it elephant for some other reason. I
Yeah, it's
forgot.
based on some movie about the troubles in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, but
That's not American, so I don't care about it.
it's
Not
just
the
that,
troubles, just anything
yeah,
not American.
the presentation of this film, I was taken back by, and I think it's an effective movie. And I wonder if younger kids watching it today would get anything out of it, even if they're so not disillusioned, just so I don't know.
I
They've
think maybe
seen,
they could be because of its presentation.
yeah, maybe so. It's just hard because now you have kids growing up where you have to hide behind a fake wall that they've built into the school instead of doing gun reformation, or I don't know. What's the, I don't know. I don't know how to fix it, but like school shooting,
I think this podcast will do it.
I think, yeah, if everyone shares this on
If
social,
everyone likes and subscribes, Jesus Christ, I'm going to stop right.
no, but
Listen, we're not making light of the issues. We're relieving tension in the conversation. If you've made it this far, you're probably
yeah,
fine.
it's just a troubling thing because
You don't say.
you get the loop. Okay, this is terrible. What are we going to do about this? Thoughts and prayers. Let's talk to our congressman. And then nothing happens and it repeats. So young people are very jaded at this point by this. So I still think the movie could be watched. I think if you're in 12th grade in school, I think they could show it in school, to me, in my opinion. But I don't know. It's a cool movie. Not in the ways I'm talking about.
Yeah,
but
yeah, we know.
the fact that it's like a HBO movie, I don't know. Totally. Check this out if you haven't watched it. Thanks for listening. Anything else you want to say about this movie?
Nope.
All right. I'm not sure what we're doing next week. We've got a couple things jumbled in the air, but I'll be back with a new video essay. We've got a couple ones coming. If you're here from that, thanks for listening. We're glad you're here. We do these pretty much every week on top of the video essays that we're trying
Yeah,
to get.
Casher's got the fundraiser for his mom below.
That's right.
More importantly, I do stand-up comedy at Scott K Comedy on Instagram.
Man. But yeah, if you want to help Casher's mom out, that's below. If you want to support us, we have 150 videos on here. We've got all kinds of stuff you can go check out. Anyway, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.